nobody knows what net zero is going to look like when you get up in 2050. If you could have a look at the what the world looks like or what the UK looks like tomorrow. Oh, sorry, 2050 by just snapping fingers. We can't tell yet because nobody has ever explained to us how it's going to be done. Back in 2008, when people created the Climate Change Act, when politicians created the Climate Change Act, they had no idea about how the emissions reduction targets were going to be achieved. But they decided nonetheless by 2050, CO2 emissions should be reduced by 80% on 1990 levels. And then in 2019, MPs decided that rather than 80%, that level should be 100%. But they've never been able to explain how you're going to drive, how you're going to heat your home, how you're going to cook, what you're going to eat, and so on and so forth. All of the things rather that are going to be seriously affected by the emissions reduction target rules. So we have had in over since then. So that's been 15 years now. Um, we've had endless promises that it's possible to simply replace coal and gas, certainly in terms of energy, electricity generation, with solar panels and wind turbines. It turns out that's not so easy. As many of us pointed out, it wasn't going to be easy. It's wind power and to a lesser extent solar power is unpredictable. Certainly, it's not. It's intermittent, right? So, you whereas in the past, grid generators were kept running to be able to meet predicted demand, and we're very good at doing that. Of course, you can't turn the wind on, right? So there's going to be a drop, and wind wind producers have made all sorts of promises over the years about how they're going to be able to produce wind turbines more cheaply. So then maybe they could have a surplus of wind power generated, and that could be stored. But that technology hasn't arrived either. I mean, well, you can certainly buy a battery that you can store power in, but it's phenomenally expensive. And at the grid scale, it's only going to work for a few hours for a cost of many, 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 many billions. Right. So I think people have tried to do the maths on the arithmetic on how much it would cost to have a battery that could last for the duration of a lull in the wind, and it's many, many trillions. So we don't really have a plan about how we're going to produce power. Meanwhile, the Climate Change Act and Net Zero requires that we phase out natural gas use, which is how I think 85% of people heat their homes, right? And they want to push, and instead of using gas, they want us to use power, which, as we know, is becoming more scarce and is becoming less reliable and is becoming more expensive. They want to use heat. So they're saying we've got to replace the gas boilers with heat pumps. But we know that heat pumps can't be produced or installed as cheaply as gas combi boilers. So I think whereas a gas combi boiler is going to cost you about £2,000 or £3,000 to put into your home, um, heat pumps are going to be 8 to 12 thousand pounds or more, depending on your home, and it's going to require a level of retrofitting that is prohibitively expensive. So I think there was an experiment by Kirklees, a local authority in Nottinghamshire, I believe, or around the East Midlands somewhere. And they did this experiment and three of their local authority houses, council houses, very modest properties, not big dwellings, and they estimated the cost. Well, they didn't estimate. They showed that the costs were £60,000 each. So this is pretty much more than knocking the houses down and rebuilding them, right? So and that's before even a heat pump was installed. So the government's advice is that or the advice to the government, and is that it's going to cost a home in the order of between 18 and £100,000 to make it net zero compliant. And rather than going, gosh, this is an awful mess we've got ourselves into, let's roll it back a bit, let's slow the agenda, let's work out how to do it first, and then we'll make a policy to require people to do it when it can be done and affordably. Rather than doing that, they've just doubled down